Welcome to AM Best Audio.
Back injuries, particularly those affecting the disc, vertebrae, and spinal cord, rank among the most common and costly injuries in the U.S. restaurant industry, according to AMTrust Financial Services 2024 Restaurant Risk Report. These injuries can result in substantial expenses, with average claims reaching up to $85,000. This growing concern for workers' compensation insurers is compounded by other common injuries, including burns and musculoskeletal strains, underscoring the urgent need for enhanced workplace safety practices across the restaurant sector. I'm Lori Chortis for AM Best Audio, and joining us now to discuss that and other findings from the report is Matt Zender, Senior Vice President of Workers' Compensation Product Management at AMTrust Financial Services. Matt, welcome. It's wonderful to speak with you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Lori. My pleasure to be here with you.
Matt, can you share some key findings from the report on the most common risk and injuries in the restaurant industry today?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So the scope of our project, we went back about 6 years for this study, looking at over 130,000 claims. This study was a follow-up study. We originally looked at this in 2022, and in that study, we looked at about 170,000 claims over a 10-year window. And through these analyses, we some trends start to emerge, and clearly, we all know the restaurant industry. We've all eaten in them, and so I think we all would have some sense as to what they might be concerned about. But when you look at the data lake in this perspective, it gives some insights. Cuts, for example, cuts were about 1/4 of all of the claims that we saw in this study. Over 30,000 of them for us. So it's the most frequent, but it wasn't the most severe. So, cuts on average tend to be smaller in severity. Burns were the second most, frequent claim that we would see. However, so those are number 1 and 2. But when you look at strains, those are easily the most expensive. And a strain claim would be 5 times more expensive than a cut claim, on example. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't focus on the cuts. It doesn't mean that we don't hope that our insureds are going to wear protective gear and use stable cutting boards and avoid distractions when they're slicing. And obviously storing their knives properly would help too. But it means that when you're thinking about, the biggest needle movers, we see that strains are much more impactful. Another insight that we found when we look at from the 2022 report to the 2024 report were that motor vehicle claims were not as impactful as they had been prior. We're seeing a continued outsourcing of the delivery function. So restaurant operators are obviously there's exceptions to this, but in total, they're seeing the value of outsourcing that function, and it's just leading to fewer MVA claims than we would have seen in our last report. So those are some of the high-level findings that we saw, Lori.
Looking at back injuries, how does the frequency and cost of those injuries in the sector impact workers' compensation insurance premiums for restaurant owners?
Well, first, a quick comment on the frequency in general. So when we looked at the 2022 report, we were coming out of COVID, and there had been a great sort of reshuffle that was happening within the restaurant space, where we saw frequency really drop between 2019 and 20. We saw it then pick up above prior levels in 21, and then in 22 and beyond, it started to settle down a little bit. So that great reshuffle and it had an impact in a lot of areas, but particularly in back. In back claims, as we mentioned, are very important. They're very impactful, and tenure can matter. So new employees who are unfamiliar with perhaps either their own limitations or they're unfamiliar with the protocols that the business has outlined, they take on risks that maybe they needn't. So back claims are very common, albeit not as common as cuts, but their frequency plus cost makes it twice as impactful as cuts or burns. So in other words, if you just took the frequency of cut claims, which I mentioned are about 1/4 of our total inventory, multiplied it by the severity, you'd have about $57 million worth of impact on our book during this time period. However, strains are double that at about 114 million. Multiple body parts, which often include back claims, are about 133 million over this. So therefore, it's the largest driver in this segment, and in my mind, it would be one of the first areas that a restaurant operator could focus on. Burns and cuts are easier to control. I mean, some of the quick hits that I mentioned in your last question about what you could do to avoid cuts, those are pretty easy to wrap your head around. But back claims can be harder, but they're very meaningful. So focusing on how to properly lift, focusing on team support, focusing on environment, and all of those things to help avoid back claims will really help the overall profitability of the risk.
You just mentioned burns. With burns and scalds being common and costly injuries, how can restaurant owners evaluate their insurance coverage to ensure it adequately protects against burn-related claims?
Burns are interesting because they have variability more so than cuts. So when you think about burns, you can have, on average, cuts tend to stay fairly small. Obviously, there's exceptions to that with amputations and things like that, but you don't see a lot of that in the restaurant space. You tend to see lacerations and things that are smaller, whereas burns have the potential to be a larger claim. And so that variability that you see both is realized in the range of claim. It's also realized in other lines of business. So, when you talk about coverage, burns can lead to fires. They can lead to property damage. They can lead to things that are beyond the workers' compensation space. So within workers' compensation, the coverage is statutory, meaning that it's prescribed by the state that you're in, and your coverage will be the same from one carrier to another. There are alternative approaches that you can focus on, but for the most part, if you're buying a guaranteed comp policy or guaranteed cost work comp policy, your coverage would be the same, but it can vary in terms of the other areas that it impacts. So burns are something that we really should be focused on. A couple of quick tips on that. You want to use oven mitts. You don't use hand towels. Those can slip. Use splatter shields. You want to allow your oil containers to cool before you're moving them, and just follow your procedures when with deep fryers. So all of those are things that can help make sure that your burns are going to be avoidable. They are, in fact, a very avoidable component of a restaurant operation.
So, what options should restaurant owners consider to safeguard against the financial risk of expensive injury claims?
Yeah, there's a few different things that they can focus on. As some of it depends on the size of the operation. So if you're talking about a larger restaurant, they may have, large deductible options that they might want to consider, alternative risk financing, things where they're going to evaluate, the carrier's cash versus their cash and how they want to prioritize that. A restaurant's going to know how safely they can operate better than anybody else. A smaller operation really is going to, maybe a mid-level operation might focus on things like dividends or some other operations. But a smaller business is going to mostly need to focus on how they're controlling their operation, how they're keeping it as safe as possible, and then making sure that those steps are understood by their agent, because their agent is going to need to help tell their story. And when you're in a market right now, the work comp market has been generally soft for a few years now. So finding, an interested carrier hasn't been the same challenge that it would have been years ago. But you still need to make sure you're telling your story, because that is going to affect how a carrier is going to underwrite that risk. And, if you've done things that are going to make you safer as an operation, then you want to make sure that you're getting full credit for that.
Exactly. What safety measures can restaurant owners implement to reduce workers' comp claims and lower insurance costs? And how would ergonomic training benefit employee health and impact insurance premiums?
Yeah, I think first off, just by thinking about that, an operator is already ahead of the game because we all understand we write at AmTrust more restaurants than anybody. It's our largest space, and so we see a lot of this, and we know that restaurant operators are wearing multiple hats. So just by being focused on ergonomics, they're going to be perhaps ahead of their competitors. We've all been in a restaurant that looks like it's running really well. A good restaurant feels like maybe a symphony or a ballet, and you can see the wait staff and the cooks. They all sort of have a rhythm to them, and they know that turn left, turn right, watch out for that door because it swings. And they've been working together, and they know the little dips and tucks and shoulder taps and things that you can do to help make sure that we all understand where we're at. That's that's a very important part of it. But taking that rhythm and that symphony, if you will, and elevating it to the next level where you're thinking about the ergonomics of it. So it's not just about working efficiently; it's about working safely. And I think a true restaurant operator, when they start to get into the ergonomics of the business, they can understand that both of those can work well, to carry my analogy forward, both of those can work in concert with each other.
Expanding a bit more on some of the things that you've already touched upon, and how can insurers help restaurants manage the financial impact of costly injuries? And how can analyzing injury claim patterns enable providers like AmTrust to develop tailored insurance solutions for the restaurant industry?
So it's a good question. We view this as part of that, and we view that a data journey like this is a virtuous cycle. We think that all parties can benefit. We at as on the carrier side, we gain by learning and gaining insights that will help us manage our book more profitably. We then in turn can pass those insights on through studies like this and hope that it helps restaurants, whether they're insured with us or with somebody else, work more safely. It also, once you start the process, you can move it into other areas that you didn't anticipate right at the beginning. And so one example of that is that we were able to take these insights from our 2022 study and learn from them and expand our offerings on the package side. So we didn't write a lot of package restaurant business previously, but we had a lot of that business on the comp side. And so we took the insights that we had from the comp side and we're able to leverage that. And now we have what we call AmTrust One, which is a coordinated offer where we're able to offer both the package and the comp together. And that wouldn't have happened, but it might have happened, but it was definitely assisted by a data journey that we started along. I think, anytime you're getting into providing insights and examples, I think it can benefit across the entire spectrum, from agents to insureds to carriers to other vendors that are involved in the space.
And what role does technology play in all this? How do real time monitoring technologies like IoT sensors and wearable devices help prevent accidents and reduce workers' comp claims in the restaurant industry? And how can AI powered incident tracking tools enable insurers and restaurant owners to analyze injury trends and create targeted safety protocols?
Yeah, this is an area that I've been keenly interested in for some time. On one level, restaurants are perfectly suited to take advantage of all of the tools that you just outlined. If you think of the technology that's available, go back to that symphony or ballet example, and you think about wearable sensors and the ability to have that symphony coordinated through IoT technology, and it makes a lot of sense. On another level, cost remains an issue. And so to outfit all of your team with sensors may not fit within the profit margin of many restaurant operations. So I think, as we continue to evolve in this space, I think you're going to see a balance between price point and impact that'll reconcile a little bit better. So right today, there aren't a lot of practical examples that a restaurant could use and use them on a cost efficient manner. Tomorrow, I think that's pretty easy to wrap your head around a world where we're all working more safely, and restaurants in particular are working more safely, benefiting from technology like that that's allowing them to understand how hot a pot might be that you're about to pick up, how to recognize someone that's just about to come around the corner and maybe you need to pause for a quick second. I think it's clearly going to be where the future is heading.
Absolutely. And Matt, what else might we see going forward? Do you see any new trends, new developments, opportunities, challenges in the restaurant industry? What's your look ahead?
So when I look to the future, I think that it's an exciting space. I think that restaurants have made more changes in the last few years than perhaps the last several combined. Some of those were forced upon them through some overarching challenges that were clearly going to, cause them to pause and reflect and consider how they needed to run their operation and maybe make some changes. We certainly saw contactless environments and things like that, which were not seen in this space prior. I think, the example that you gave prior is with technology and sensors, I think is clearly something that will move into the restaurant space. One thing that we know is that this is an area that we all enjoy to access. I think restaurants are obviously going to be around forever, and we just want to help do whatever part we can to help them work as safely as possible. It's an area that we spend a lot of time and energy on, and we certainly do appreciate the opportunity to share our study with you today, Lori.
Well, thank you. This has been so interesting, so informative. I thank you for all that you're doing, and thank you for sharing this with us.
Thank you.
That was Matt Zender, Senior Vice President of Workers' Compensation Product Management at AMTrust Financial Services. And for AM Best Audio, I'm Lori Chortis.
Looking to get the full attention of the insurance industry? We have the platforms that will do just that. Whether it be AM Best TV, AM Best Audio, Best Review Magazine, or Best Day. Find out more by calling AM Best Advertising Sales at 908-439-2200, extension 5399, and have a great day.